of things. I guess they thought I wouldn't make it. I guess they thought I would fall on my face and just stay there. But baby, that's just not who I am. Oh.
All right, you guys, welcome back to today's episode. In today's episode, we're diving into a powerful conversation for this month. The conversation today is going to be all about inner work, income, and the imposter syndrome, that stuff that we kind of live behind our titles and those polished social media bios. So today I'm joined with Tine Zekis, a former high school math teacher turned tech strategist and the creator behind Getting Black Women Paid, from burnout and panic attacks to negotiating her way into multiple, I say again, high paying roles. Teen's journey isn't just inspiring, it's strategic. And strategy is a thing that we have to have and incorporate into our lives. So she brings receipts, tools, and truth for every woman trying to pivot and grow and get paid without losing herself in the process. So if you yourself are wrestling with imposter syndrome, career burnout, or wondering if it's too late to change paths, this episode is for you. So let's go ahead and get into it and get started. Please help me welcome Miss Teen. How are you today? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me and for that intro. It's so funny when you talk about imposter syndrome. Every time I get introduced, I'm like, oh, is that me? Are you talking about? But yes, it's all true. It's all true.
It's everything you've accomplished. It's you. And I'm so excited to have you join me in this conversation. Like we're, in my October series where it's about inner work this month. And I know that for me, it's just important to do that work, outside of the context of our podcast, From Grief to Purpose. But along our journey from those painful places to purpose, there's like those middle parts. We still have a life. We still have things that we're doing and developing, and we're still becoming those people that we want to be, or those women that we see ourselves being. Like, I don't know about you all, but I have this vision of myself in the future. I see her. I'm trying to get there. I know that I have some blocks that I as well have to conquer. And so I just thought that it's so perfect to have you join me in this conversation so that we can, help educate, so you can encourage other people, because I'm a firm believer that no matter what you have gone through, you still got to add tools to your process so that you can be successful. So I thought we would start off today. You're this high paying achiever, successful Black woman. You have this great place of where you're at right now. But I thought that we would start at the beginning of your story. Like, how did you go from, being, like I mentioned in your bio, a high school math teacher to, becoming the career pivoter and, and in these positions of, fair pay? Like, how did you make those moves? What is the story? Let's get into the story first.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, because I think so many of us are always comparing ourselves to the ends of people's stories, the middle, the highlights, and we don't see that struggle that happened beforehand. So thank you so much for that, for starting at the beginning.
Show me the bottom.
Right, exactly. So I was in education for many years, but I was a classroom teacher with my own classroom for 6 school days. So I always feel like I have to repeat it when I say that. That's 6 school days. I mean, I'd been working at the school throughout the summer. I set up the classroom. I had all the strategies. I had all my plans. And in that first 5 days, I lost 7 pounds. I was having multiple panic attacks and vomiting. I was miserable. I can teach a math concept in 10 different ways, but I only know one way to say, don't talk when someone else is talking without inserting cuss words, right? And I just did not have control over that classroom. And we had a long weekend. It was Labor Day weekend. I was like, all right, I revamped the structure of the room so that it would be more conducive to, whatever the strategies were. And I came back that Tuesday and I threw up twice before first period. And I was like, that's it. That's my body is telling me this is not it. I remember there were times where I'd be driving to school and I would think, oh, you know what? If I hit that median, I could go to the hospital instead of going to school. And that's when you know that's not it, right? And the thing was, I had spent my whole life. I mean, I've been a teacher my whole life. When I decided to be a math teacher, it was in high school. I was tutoring other kids. I had one of my worst teachers in math junior year, and she would get really frustrated. She would only explain it one way. And people would be asking questions and she'd start yelling and stuff. So I would raise my hand and ask a question like, oh, well, is it kind of like this? And people be writing it down. And so it was hard for me to step away from something that I felt like I was built for. But then when I got into it, it wasn't what I needed it to be. And my body was telling me every day, this is not it. So yes, on day 6, I resigned. My dad, who had come in and helped me put up all them posters, came back and helped me take them all down. And I left with no plan for what was next. And so I spent 1 year as a substitute teacher at my old high school. There were 5 math teachers having babies. So I taught everything from, remedial algebra all the way up to calculus. I was just going through all of those parental leaves. One of the teachers taught AP computer science in addition to math. And so I was staying a chapter ahead of the kids, trying to figure out, this coding thing. And I realized that there were times where all 30 kids could have a different answer and be right. Whereas in math, it's okay, did everybody get 17, And I didn't realize there was creativity in programming. So I took a boot camp and I became a software developer. And I remember when I was getting ready for my first role, and I was worried about the negotiation process, right? I'm brand new to it. I don't have any experience in programming. What am I going to tell them to try to negotiate? And that's when I started to leverage my skills as a career changer, right? So in my interview that landed that first role, I said, well, I'm a developer who can speak human. I can break down a concept and explain it to people who don't have a technical background, which is something that maybe your engineers who've been doing this their whole career can't do. And so when I got into negotiating, I also knew I was not going to find out that the white guy next to me with the same qualifications was making more than I was. So I negotiated every time. And after some strategic job moves and negotiations, I doubled my teaching salary in 2 years, and I more than tripled it in less than 5 years. Along the way, I was mentoring other Black women on how to do the same. Some were making parallel moves within the industry and still doubling their income. Some were moving from education into tech, right? And increasing their income that way. And I started speaking. I was speaking on imposter syndrome for career changers, for women in tech, for Black folks in tech. And I was trying to make a speaking business happen. And I just wasn't feeling it. I was doing all these cold emails to organizations, and I felt like I was in a rut. And I spoke with a coach, and she said, well, what lights you up? What keeps you, what gets you smiling for days? And I said, getting Black women paid. And then that was it. She was like, get on GoDaddy, get the URL. So gettingblackwomenpaid.com, that's me. And and from there, that was the mission. It started out mostly with career coaching, helping folks navigate their careers and negotiate their salaries. But then basically since the 2024 election, pretty much every Black woman I speak to is talking about starting her own business, right? Even if the conversation is about a career advancement, she'll at some point say, well, until I'm doing my own thing. And I'm like, wait, let's talk about that for a minute, right? So in that time, my business pivoted, and now I still do help women in their careers, but I'm now mostly focused on helping, budding entrepreneurs launch their businesses.
Listen, so much to dive into. My brain is going everywhere. Especially, being a woman of business myself, I have all the questions. Let me get back on track here because I want to my own personal questions. We can talk offline. So, when did you make that hard pivot though, from teaching to, helping Black women get paid this particular business? Because sometimes that shift is hard. That you are supposed to be doing something else. You're not happy with what you're doing now. There's a pivot that has to be made. And a lot of people are scared to make from, I have bills to pay to,
Yes.
but I have this, dream, this thing that I know this is what I'm purposed to do. Like,
Mhm.
did you face per se like imposter syndrome yourself, or do you just necessarily like your main thing is just to help women that are tackling imposter syndrome, to help
Yeah.
guide them out? Like, what was your particular process with that?
Yeah. I mean, imposter syndrome is not a thing you accomplish and check off the box and you're done with it, right? I wrote a book on imposter syndrome, and literally there were times where I was going back and reading previous chapters to be like, right, right, perfectionism, keep writing, like it's a very weird thing to be an expert on because it's a little it's like a weird meta situation where I'm like trying to tell other people, but I'm still struggling. It's just about kind of recognizing which kinds of things kind of bring those thoughts on, and really going back into your toolbox so that hopefully that cycle is shorter each time. In terms of the decision, I was pretty cautious about it. I started out still working full time as an engineer because that salary, like at some point I knew I didn't want to be an engineer anymore, and that it was going to be really hard to find another job with that same salary. Right? It was kind of the golden handcuffs situation, right? Where, when I was in boot camp, I was dating this guy, things were going well. By the time I finished, we were moved in together, we were getting engaged, and then when I got that first role, we were getting married and having kids. Now I'm the sole breadwinner for a family of four. And so it's not really a choice to say, well, I'm going to let this go and then, follow my dream and hope it works out, right? Like there had to be some practicality to it. So it definitely started with, okay, I'm going to do this on the side. I'm going to try to build this out while I continue to pull in that salary, right? So for me, I tried to approach it in a way where the risk level was pretty low, just because I didn't feel like I was in a position to be able to take a huge risk like that.
Yeah.
When I quit my teaching job, I was living with my parents. That's a whole different level of, you know what, I'm just going to go out there and I know that things will be okay. I was fortunate enough to have that safety net. And I know not everybody has that, right? And so when I'm talking with people, for instance, if they're in a toxic work situation, sometimes the answer is you have to leave without a plan. But sometimes the answer is you really have to look for that next thing while you're working because you don't have the runway to say, screw it, I'm just going to hope things work out real soon. And so you really have to kind of balance, what safety nets do you have? What savings do you have? Like, what's your runway to be able to pursue this thing? And so it might involve, let me hold on to this while I start pursuing that.
And so how would you say, specifically just towards the imposter syndrome, like give us an example of what you would tell someone that's like having like real issues with that, like how do they silence that, inner critic within themselves?
Yes,
And sometimes that inner critic will make you be like, no, I'm gonna stay right here. Like I'm just gonna,
for sure.
because it gets scary, it's a scary process. But staying right here, if you like what you mentioned earlier, I'm not happy here. But
Right.
this is where I feel like, this is what I know. This is really all that I feel like I'm capable of doing. How would you suggest, or what are some things that you practice with your now on how to silence that inner voice that's, the negatives, the doubts, and
Yeah.
all the things?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, specifically with Black women, I often try to start by acknowledging that they're not crazy, right? Imposter syndrome, it sounds like this clinical diagnosis. It's not a clinical diagnosis. That's just the term we use for it. But oftentimes, especially for Black women, you're not experiencing some weird, wacky thoughts that you just invented. You're observing the systems around you telling you every day that you don't belong, right? You're getting mistaken for the secretary when you're really the senior product manager or whatever. You're getting told every day you don't belong here. You're not seeing yourself in leadership, right? And those structural issues, those are what I call imposter systems. And that, you're not crazy. You're just observing the world. You're just aware. And I don't have the answers for how to tear down the patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism and all of those things. So in the meantime, you need to live your life, right? And so that's where the strategies about imposter syndrome come in. You're not broken. We're not trying to fix you, but we do need to build up some strategies so that you can be resilient against those systems that are designed to make us feel like we don't belong. And of course, sometimes we internalize those things. So I kind of start with that, right? We don't want to be placing blame on ourselves for something that really the systems are designed to make us feel that way. But then going further into it, how many Black women have heard you got to work twice as hard to get half as much? And we know once we get into those spaces that we're more qualified than anybody else because we know we had to work so much harder to get there, right? We're the most educated, which means we have the most student debt, right? And then yet we're still amongst the least paid. And so I do think even if you have those imposter feelings, you can still admit when you break it down, you're like, you know what? I did have to bust my butt to get here. And I know I'm at least as qualified as my peers, right? And that it's that, those feelings will come in, but let's look at the facts, right? And so a lot of it is about the receipts. Write down your accomplishments. Write down when someone comes to you for advice. Write down when someone gives you positive feedback and practice receiving that feedback without diminishing it, right? Oh, it was a team effort. It wasn't such a big deal. No, you did that. And if it was easy for you, that's because you've honed those skills over years. It's not because it was an easy thing to do, right? And so a lot of it is kind of training ourselves over time to, again, sometimes we have to like physically bring the receipts and then go back and look at them and say, hey, no, I did that, right? I built that. And often we don't recognize, especially the things that do come easily to us, we don't even recognize those as skills. And it's like, no, other people don't do that well, and you do. So yeah, and obviously it's different for everyone. People will need different strategies, but I think the main thing, especially for Black women, is knowing, you know what, the fact that I'm even in this room is because I did stuff here that nobody else even had to do to get here.
Those receipts though that you speak of, I think of it's okay to validate yourself. Like you don't need anybody else to validate you, and then go back on that history. Because I can say too, I've had to do that even in my own personal journey, when starting things, especially when you're starting a business, because business is sometimes all you. Sometimes you ever see those things where like on the reels where they like play in the background music and like, oh hi, I'm the receptionist and I'm the
Yeah.
the bookkeeper. And I'm also, like it was
It's a one-woman show.
woman show over here. Like,
And
but
you're learning each of those roles. You're new to each of those roles.
each and every one of them. And you don't even think about that sometimes because you're just in the doing process and you forget, like, your receipts, like you're saying, like, oh, I'm doing this. So, I'm creating, not only am I learning a role, but, you forget like what's in you, like what's you're capable of doing. And again, like I've had to check myself several times, like, you have this whole history of, life experience, career experience. Do not second yourself. Like
Yes.
you are, worth building your own table and making that thing happen. So
Mm.
when I think of how you just guide, women out of that imposter syndrome, I like the fact that you're speaking of, it's gonna be different for every person because everybody faces their own battle.
Mhm.
But it is a battle sometimes to like fight through your own, stuff. But that stuff comes from somewhere, like you mentioned, like, we're created to in this world, we can't help the place that we live in the wherever you are. I'm not gonna just say the United States of America because this, could go anywhere. But
Yes.
this earth, and what we are, around and incorporated in certain systems, a part of that could be, already in our mental DNA, and you don't even know, like, why am I thinking like this? Why am I second guessing myself? Why am I, what is your, what are your surroundings? What are you uh feeding as well as you're as you're building, as you're growing. That's why I'm really big on too, and why I wanted to have you on, to also surround yourself, with people that have already done it, are
Yes.
successful, because that healthy, communication, community is very key to, like, your process. But I wanted to
Well,
ask you too. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to add to a couple of the things you just said. So one was that, yes, you got to be your own advocate. You got to be the one that's building yourself up. But for so many of us, we are our own worst critics. We say things to ourselves very easily that we would never say to someone else, not even an enemy, let alone a friend. Right? Like for me, I have trouble getting up in the morning, and then I'll be sitting there being like, "Oh, look what time it is. How could you? You're so stupid. You knew you had to do whatever." And it's like, if your friend was like, "Oh, I stayed in bed later than I wanted to," would you say any of those things to her?
Right. Isn't that
You
crazy?
know, and so one of the things I do encourage people to do is, well, I mean, one, try to notice and interrupt those thoughts, but also surround yourself with, I call it your hype squad, right? But with those friends who are going to say the kind thing to you, who are going to remind you, of the things that you've accomplished when you forget, right? That it's still not it's not a solo sport. Right. Like we still want to surround ourselves with the people who are going to build us up in the ways that we might have a hard time building ourselves.
Absolutely. And teaching him, one of the young ladies I was speaking to previously, she had said something, which made me think, like, I love that you are able to do that, but we should do, like, if you're, whatever your circle is, whoever that is, like, we should be able to teach them, like, your communication style, because my
Yes.
communication style may not be your communication style, as far as, like, what we're, how we receive, or even if let's say you say something to me, teen, that I'm just like, like, most of the time we're just like quiet, or it's like, okay, I'm gonna let that pass, But instead of saying, you know what, I'm not having a great day today, I need you to talk to me like this, or, put those boundaries up, so that we can really build one another up, not just with the cute stuff, like, versus some real raw
Yes.
conversation. And it doesn't mean that you love the person less, or you always have to block people that you're not getting along with. It could just mean that, they just, don't know what they don't know. And we need to start having those conversations, because a lot of that centers around too mental health, and, how we, want to grow in, or if we want to grow with that person in a real friendship, true friendships.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I had someone say something to me in regards to a particular situation, and then they were like, "Well, if I was that person, I would do this." And I thought to I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, you don't even realize, like, how much I have done for this person over here. So for them to say this because they don't know the history, I'm just like, okay, you obviously don't know me very well. So, that just shows the level of friendship. But, it's very, I'm very key. I'll say that, on being mindful of what your circle is, and is it a healthy circle? Because that equates to, how they say you are who you hang around. Like, where am I going?
Yeah.
I'm trying to go here, but who am I hanging around?
Yeah. My dad, he's a Yoruba man, and he always comes with the proverbs. And even when I was a kid, he'd always say, "Show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are." And that's
It's true. It is so true. And, I always share, like, don't be scared to cut some people off, because sometimes you have to do that along your life journey. It is what it is. You're not meant to take everybody with you. I'm a big fan of the saying and believer that people are in your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. It's one or the other. But I wanted to ask you, like, what's one of the biggest myths maybe about negotiating salary, like, when you're at this point now, and, or knowing, like, your worth, that you wish that other women would let go of? I know for me, I'll share, like, in business, like, it's uncomfortable a little bit sometimes to be like, okay, I know that I'm worth this, so I need to ask for this amount here and stand on that, and not let my kindness,
Mhm.
take front seat before a business, because it's two separate things. Like, it's okay for me to still be a nice person, but yet, I still have a salary that I need to negotiate.
Right. Right.
Bills still have to get paid, and I can't pay them with, nice tokens, like, hey, like a little smile. I can't pay them with smiles. Or, so what would you say is, like, one of the biggest myths about negotiating salary, or knowing your worth, that you wish women would let go of?
Oh my goodness, I have a couple. I love that you brought up wanting to be nice, right? Because I think one of the biggest ones is that, so many of us were socialized to not rock the boat. I don't want to seem greedy, right? I don't want to seem aggressive. And the thing is, most employers are expecting to negotiate. I don't remember the year of it, but it was a couple years ago. There was a study that said like 73% of companies expect to negotiate, but it's only about 45% of employees who do. And so, I try to say, come into that conversation knowing you're going to negotiate, and don't do it in the moment, right? I have something I say after every offer. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'd love to get a copy of the benefits in writing and get back to you. And then I get off the phone. Because you don't have to decide in that moment, how you're going to strategize, how you're going to do things. And I always want to give this example. First of all, I use real numbers because a lot of us, it's taboo to talk about how much we make. And that's why none of us know what's a good salary, right? So I was working as a software engineer. I was making $100,000 a year. And I was looking to make a parallel move, same role, same level, same title. And I was hoping to get to 120. And I went through the process. I got the offer and it was 140. And of course I wanted to be like, yes, please. And thank you. And, celebrate. But I said what I always say, right? Thank you so much. I'd love to see a copy of the benefits and get back to you. That day I saw a tweet. It was still Twitter. They were still tweets. And it said, Black women, whatever you were going to ask for more. And I was like, dang, I still got to negotiate, right? So I did some math. I figured out, because I'd already done my research and that's where I'd gotten that 120 figure from. But I did some math on, it was June, and what it would look like to leave my role mid-year, what kind of money I was leaving on the table, right? There's an annual bonus that gets paid out at the end of the year. They only match the 401k once a year. I was going to have to start over on my deductible for my health insurance, right? So I kind of did some calculations and I decided I was leaving about $15,000 on the table by not leaving this, or by not staying at this company the rest of the year. So I brought that to them. I asked for another 15,000. They gave me 8. So, I was ready to just say, yes, thank you to the 140, but I ended up starting at 148. And I thought about it and I thought, what if I had taken that 140 happily? So grateful. I want to be so grateful. And then the white guy next to me was offered that same 140 and he negotiated. And he comes in at 148. Now we have this gap. And every bonus, every raise, it's a percentage. So that gap is just going to get wider and wider. And when I got there, I made friends with a couple other women engineers and we started sharing our salaries. And it turns out I was making about 10,000 more than one of them and more than 20,000 more than the other. And so when it came time for those annual compensation discussions, they knew exactly what to ask for. And so by that time that we were all getting our raises, all 3 of us were up to 150. And I always tell that story because, so many of us think, oh, I just want to be grateful. I don't want to sound greedy. But in what I did, I ended up bringing up other women in that organization as well, right? What's greedy about that? There's nothing, especially for us, when we do well, our communities do well, our families do well. There is nothing greedy about getting more for ourselves because so many of us are giving that back as well. Yeah. So that's one of the myths, kind of the, I should be grateful. I don't want to be greedy. The other one, it's a phrase I heard you say, and I hear it so many times, is this know your worth. I actually hate that phrase, and I'll tell you why. No shade to you. I mean, I understand why people say it, and it does sound empowering at first. But for me, I think, well, your worth doesn't have a monetary value. There's no amount of money where someone could own you, where someone could buy you, right? So your worth, you're invaluable. So there's actually no number too high. So for me, instead of saying, know your worth, I always encourage people to know you're worthy. You are inherently worthy as a human being, and there is no number too high, right? Because when we say, oh, okay, I'm worth Really? I'm worth $148,000? No, I'm selling a service for $148,000. I'm giving my time in exchange for $148,000. My worth? How much would you need to pay to own me? $1 million? No? 2 million? Right? There's no number that would equate to your worth. And so, and I think that, that mindset of I'm worthy as a person and no number is too high. That's how we can shift. I have folks who are saying, oh, I really want to get to 6 figures. And that's a great milestone.
Yeah.
But that same person can get to 200,000, 250, 300,000, as long as they know that there's no number too high.
Wow. Listen, y'all see why it's so important? Like inner work series, right? We're talking about inner work, but worth over worthy, knowing that you're worthy. Run that back. So let's run it back one more time. Let's run it back. So let's help somebody, that just their ears weren't clear. They were cleaning up the house, they're driving.
Yes.
Like she said, I'm worthy, right? Because you said something, my worth. Do you own me? Am I, so I put the dollar is what I hear on my, like, if I want this is my cap. I'm not settling, versus, because I think that grateful piece, like you were saying, like they say, okay,
Right.
120,000, knowing they have wiggle room, right? But there's something on the inside of us, the individual, that will say, okay, I'm not gonna ask for more. Like I'm good here.
Right.
Let's run that back. Let's break that down to
Yes.
and what is that? Like, what is that keeps us maybe from not understanding that you are worthy, of, whatever it is that that you um, should be making.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the more we can remove our self-worth from those things, right? The more we tie our self-worth to a number, the more challenging it is to change our view of what number is possible, right? When I was a teacher, I was making $43,000 a year. So the first time someone offered me 60, I'm like, "Woo, that's incredible. That's amazing." And so I think that we want to separate our worthiness as people from the monetary value of what we're going to bring in. And I will say it again. So I never say in terms of salary or even as a business owner setting your prices, I'm never going to say know your worth, because your worth as a human being is priceless. There's no monetary value where someone could own you. So instead of knowing your worth, you need to know you're worthy, and that no number is too high.
Listen, I keep saying that I need a bell or something because there's so many gems.
I love it.
Invest in a bell or something, a ding, a soundboard. It's coming, y'all. I promise we are growing as a podcast. But I'm just like, so it makes me think of too, like on a flip note of all that stuff that you have to take off, like the layers that make us feel like we're unworthy is past trauma. Like this month, we're recording in the month of October. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? And so think about women that are in those particular situations, men that are in those particular situations. But trauma, is a real thing, and the things that we go through in life that will sometimes make you think like, I'm just gonna do this right here, and this is that I am worthy of. This is all that because um, I always say it's a mental connection, spiritual connection, and then physical, attachments as well. But it's just like all of that you have to unpack and take off of you before you can come to the realization of your own, that you are, capable, or of doing whatever it is that you really want to do and making whatever that you want to make.
Right. Because, typically I'm talking about imposter syndrome in terms of, your career or your business, but it comes up in our relationships.
Yeah.
It comes up in not even just romantic relationships, friendships, parenting, being a daughter or son, right? And I think one of the most effective tools that an abusive person has, I shouldn't even say tools, weapons, is to lower your self-worth.
Yeah.
To make you feel like you're not worthy of being treated differently. You're not worthy of love. You're not worthy of not even like being put on a pedestal, being being worshipped, right? And for me, my family is royalty in Nigeria. And, I come to things with this knowledge of I'm a princess, what you gonna do? Right? But you need to build that over time. Right. And I think that most of us, we all are descendants of royalty, right? And we should be treated like queens.
Listen, pause for a second. She said, I'm a princess. What are you going to do?
I made the mistake of telling my 7-year-old daughter about our royal lineage, and now she's like, I'm a princess. I need my, But it's true, right? If you go into situations knowing that you're worthy of care, you're worthy of respect, you're worthy of love and appreciation. And that can be from, your work environment to your relationships, right? Like sometimes the reason to leave a job, it's not specifically the money.
Yeah.
It's the lack of recognition, the lack of appreciation, right? When you're underpaid, you're also undervalued. And so it's at that inner work, right? To feel that sense of worthiness. No, I deserve a workplace that's going to recognize my talents. And not in the work speaks for itself kind of way. You still got to tell people about it. But if you tell people about it and then you still get passed up for the promotion, right? You need to develop that inner strength to know, this is not what I deserve. And I should go somewhere where I'm going to be treated the way I deserve to be treated.
Absolutely. Listen, and I think that's the key part that you said there too, where you definitely have to be in, the type of work environment where, they are taking care of their people. I think that's something that has to be taught to corporate leaders, but it's
Yes.
all work industries, period. Like pay your people, take care of your people because that's the backbone of your organization anyway, right? What one man or what one CEO anyway wants to do everything by themselves and they got there. I always feel like people have gotten here, you know what I'm saying, for a reason, right? You didn't do it by yourself. So what
Mm-hmm.
hard in giving back, training up your people, getting them ready to getting them promoted, whatever you have to do, because you know that you're not doing it all by yourself. You didn't build what you built by
Right.
yourself.
Right.
And
And it's not just pay them well, it's train them, it's support them and their growth and help promote them. Absolutely.
yes, and
Yeah.
then too, like, like you said, you have to ask, like you have to speak up and be that type of person that is you've built that, that confidence, within yourself to speak up. Cause I know sometimes, like if you're not a person that's used to speaking up for yourself, it can be hard,
Yeah. And I will say it's still hard.
yeah.
Right. I am a person who coaches other people on how to do this, and it's still hard. So don't think that because it's hard, that means you can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. Just the other day, I was at a conference, and it was one of those huge hotel resort things with a convention center. And I was in the farthest wing from the convention center. And I'm in physical therapy for a knee injury. And I'm like, and I feel fine, but the problem is I'll feel fine and then I'll overdo it. And I was like, I don't know. It's kind of stinks, but it's like, no, go ask. So I went to the front desk. I said, hey, is it possible for me to get closer? I have a knee injury. And they said, let me check. A few clicks later, not only did I get a room in the wing closest to the convention center, they sent somebody to bring my stuff. Right. And so, the answer is always no if you don't ask. But if you do ask, it might be a yes. And it might be a yes with a bellhop and an upgrade, right? Like, you don't know what it's going to be. And so it's pushing through that, because I don't like to call customer service. I don't like to talk to people. I don't like to do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you got to push through it. There was a quote I read this year that I've been recycling over and over again by Sam Harris. It says, faking courage and real courage are the same thing.
Mm,
And I just take that with me everywhere I go, right? I don't feel courageous,
yeah.
but I'm still gonna do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. So it's not about getting to the point where you feel like you have the courage. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like you said, not everybody is like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are people that you popped out the womb and you were just ready for the world. I don't know. But, it's like you were mentioning, how they say closed mouths don't get fed, right?
Exactly.
But it's so true. Like there's a scripture that says, was it seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open, ask and you shall receive, right? And so, but if you never open your mouth, because whatever it is, on the inside of you, it's just like, no, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna be okay with what I have right here, meek and humble and because you feel like you have to be that way. It's just like knowing that you desire more. I always feel like, let me touch on this. So I feel like if that desire is in you to want more, it's for a reason. I feel like you should
Yes.
go after those things. And it's gonna be scary. It's gonna be hard. It might be hard, to get there because nothing is
Mhm.
was like I wish there was. I wish there was $1 million line. Like I would be first thing, let me pack my bags. Like what time are we eating for the $1 million? Or what is that? Everybody would, but it's just like when you're try to go towards something that's really for you, like whatever's in you to go after,
Mhm.
the road is not going to be easy. It's not always going to be cushy and feel good and, your abilities or things that you're going to have to work through. So I'm definitely like, sometimes you have to build up to that point where it's like I have to work myself up even to ask because that is
Yes.
a big effort for some people to open your mouth and, say something. So yeah.
Yeah. And I also encourage people, especially when they're in that worry, oh, I don't want to say something. I don't want to seem this way. I try to have them walk through, well, what's the best case scenario? You
Mhm.
ask, they say yes. Maybe it's even they say yes and they give you something else on top of it, right? The worst case, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
And really walk through that, right? Okay, so I went and I advocated for myself and they said no, and in fact you're fired and now I'm going to be homeless or whatever. Like you can like work through what's the worst case scenario and then you can decide, is that ridiculous or is that really plausible? And I think especially when someone is negotiating for an offer, when they, their first offer into a role or to an organization, I try to ask, like, what is your need level? Do you need this job? Are you desperate for this job? Have you been looking for 9 months and you're about to get evicted and you need this job? In that case, maybe it's take it. Maybe the answer is take it because I can't afford the worst case scenario where they rescind the offer. But maybe it's take it and then keep looking, or take it and say, can we revisit this in 90 days? Or maybe in 90 days you say, hey, now that I know more about the responsibilities, I'd love to revisit that conversation, right? But if you are able to, if you're in a situation where it's like, okay, I'm working and I'm looking, and you wonder what that worst case scenario is, let's say they rescind the offer. That is a blessing. Because how can you work for a place that's going to punish you for advocating for yourself? What's it going to be? What would it have been like to work there? How would you ask for the tools you need, the time you need, the support you need to do your job well? And this is another quote. This is from a friend of mine who unfortunately passed away a few weeks ago. And I thank you. And I keep coming back to something he used to say. He said, a company's culture is not the values they have listed on their website. A company's culture is the behaviors they reward and punish. And so I approach that negotiation as our first team building exercise, right? This is a team sport. It's not me versus them. It's, hey, I'm so excited. I can't wait to contribute to the team. I was actually looking, based on my research in the market, I was actually hoping for closer to X. How can we work together to get closer to that? Right. And maybe salary can't come up. Okay, well, then can we talk about PTO? Can we talk about a work from home stipend? Can we talk about a signing bonus right there? It's a team building exercise. And if they don't want to be on your team, you don't want to be on their team.
Listen.
And
And
so, and I tried again in this market, I want to caveat that advice and say, like, if you need it, take it.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I think it was an article saying in the first 3 months or in the first 3 months of this administration, 300,000 Black women lost their jobs.
Mm,
If you need it, take it. And you can still continue to advocate for yourself once you're there. You can still keep looking once you're there, but take it in a way that's strategic, not in a way that's, well, this is the best I can do. This is all I'm worth. Right? You can say, hey, I need to pay the bills. I'm going to take it. And I'm going to keep looking for something where I do feel more confident negotiating because now I have this in my back pocket.
Listen, that's wisdom. That is definite wisdom right there. I love that. If you need it, take it, but keep building.
Yes.
Be strategic, especially when, as you're working on your worthiness, keep going and push back. And I'm saying this too. I'm not talking like, 'cause I definitely don't have my entire life figured out, or as far as like, and I still have to push through things too. Like Tine was sharing too. Is she courageous every single moment, every single day? No, neither am I. Like, I don't show up. I still have to like, okay, Nina, we're doing this. You already said you like, we're not going to talk ourselves out of it. We're doing it and present myself in that way, whatever you have to do to encourage yourself. But before we wrap up the podcast, I got to get into your book. I wanted to just touch on a little bit about the book and the depth of it and what you want to share, excuse me, about your particular book, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome at Work. Why should someone pick up this book? Why should Black women or the masses pick up this particular book, and how would it help them? And you guys, all the links for Teen are going to be left down. They're in the description for you, so be sure to check them out. But what's the takeaway for getting?
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, it's Overcoming Imposter Syndrome at Work, the Black Woman's Guide to Conquer Perfectionism, Stop Overthinking, and Thrive in Your Career. And, in the intro, I do talk about those imposter systems, right? This is not about fixing you. You are not the problem. But while we tear down the patriarchy, right, we still need to live our lives. And so the book is about the practical strategies that you can use, how to recognize your specific triggers so that you can interrupt those thoughts earlier and earlier in the cycle, right? There's also a quiz on what kind of imposter syndrome or what kind of imposter you have, right? And then you can use that as a gauge kind of throughout the rest of the book so that as we're talking through these strategies, you can say, okay, this is what would work for me because I'm a perfectionist or because I'm the person who needs to keep getting the certifications and the, proving that I have all the knowledge, right? And so it's really about the practical day-to-day stuff we can do to push through those things. And each chapter has a story about a Black woman doing the thing.
Wow. Now you also do have a free gift for our listeners. Right? And is that the quiz that you're speaking of, that it comes with? Uh, I believe
No, so the quiz is in the book. The free gift is actually for those Black women who are saying, you know what, this I'm seeing the writing on the wall. This system isn't for me. I need to build my own thing. And so it's From Paycheck to Power. It's a step-by-step guide on how to launch your business. So if you are one of these women saying, okay, I'm in this career, okay, I'm going to do it until it doesn't make sense to do it, or I don't want to keep making more and more money for some millionaire or billionaire, I want to do my own thing, this is the guide to get you started. And it can be as a side business while you're still holding on to that salary, right? Or it can be, you know what, I'm dropping everything, I'm going to hit the ground running with this. But it kind of walks you through what are those steps you're going to need to launch a business successful.
And one last thing too, I want to ask you, listen, 'cause I could talk all day to you. I can talk all day. Your questions, I know I'm gonna hit you up like after the podcast, of course, for myself. But what is something that you would say is, because I believe in mentorship, I believe in coaching, I believe in therapists, I believe in help.
Yes.
Where's the help?
All of the above, yes.
But I do have a tendency, right? I have a side of myself where I have a creative side of me, and I have a very corporate side. I can be corporate when I need to, but when it was time to break free and do my own creative thing and walk in that particular journey, I could be very individual minded. Like, I got it. I'm doing this, and I honestly would have started off so much more organized in the beginning of my own personal business journey had I been like, no, let's get a mentor, let's get a coach,
Yes.
but at the time, that type engagement, I wasn't too familiar with it until I started, becoming into this network of, like,
Mhm.
okay, business coaches, business mentors, and things like that, right? So what would you tell someone, why is it important, or why do you think there's importance there for someone to have, even getting the books? Like, if you can't afford a coach right now, like getting the book, like getting not
Mhm.
start everything individually on
Yeah.
your like the mistake I made, you guys. Why is it so important just to get the proper tools and get those coaches and get those mentors when you are making those, you're about to make a hard pivot, if
Yeah.
you're listening to this podcast and it's resonating to you, it's because you are about to make a hard shift, a hard pivot, and you need, some wisdom in your corner. So why is that?
Yes.
Why would you say it would be necessary for someone to have proper tools, coaches, or mentors?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. I think the main reason is because those coaches and mentors have made the mistakes, have spent years learning the lessons that you don't have to, right? That you don't need to reinvent the wheel and go make all the same mistakes that somebody else has already done and can say, hey, before you start, I learned from this and I want you to learn from my mistakes. And I want you to save that time, effort, and money preventing those same mistakes, because most businesses take years to build up, and you want to be able to take the wisdom from the people who put in the work for those years and say, how can I create a shortcut? How can I get to a point where I'm profitable sooner? So that's kind of the logistical reason. I think emotionally, a lot of us, maybe we don't know other people who are starting businesses. Maybe our friends don't get it. Maybe our family is like, you're crazy. Why would you leave that job to do this thing? You need support from people who understand what you're doing, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build, and who can encourage you in that way. And one thing I'm trying to do, because, especially in this time that feels very uncertain, I think a lot of people are worried about making the investment in themselves, in their businesses, right? Having a one-on-one coach can be very expensive, right? So I actually built a new service. I call it pocket coaching with Tine. I had a client who said, I just wish I had a little Tine in my pocket, to jump in and when I need it. And so basically what it is, it's just a monthly subscription. It's $197 a month, which, is much more affordable than my one-on-one coaching rate. And you have access to me through Slack. You can send a message, you can send a voice note, and I'll get back to you usually within a business day. And it could just be a pep talk. It could be strategy. Hey, I'm thinking about this pivot. What do I do? How do I approach this marketing question? Right? Whatever you're working on, you have a partner, a thought partner to work you through it. And again, sometimes it's a pep talk, right? I just need a cheerleader. I just need someone in my corner to remind me that I got this. Um, and then actually right now I'm also offering it with a single coaching session so that we can have that one-on-one time and still really get to know you, get to know your goals, your challenges, and then we build out that work that we're doing kind of more asynchronously through Slack. And I think that that approach so far has been really beneficial for folks who are saying like, it's how much an hour? Like it's, coaching is how much, right? Whereas, having that support more like when you need it and not when you've already scheduled the Zoom call and whatever, right? Things come up all the time. And so it's nice to know that someone's kind of in your corner cheering you on, maybe even an accountability partner, right? I'm going to send you a message every Tuesday. Hey, how are your goals going? Did you do the thing you said you were going to do? And so in that regard, I think it kind of lowers the bar to entry on getting a coach. And so that's something I'm really, really excited to be offering now.
Wow. Listen, I think one of the key things too, like one of the important takeaways that you mentioned too, is though that it's an investment, and if we think about it, because a lot of times, we don't invest into self. And it's like we'll invest into vacations, we'll, go to fast food restaurants, fine dining restaurants, the new bag, the new, outfit, the car, right? But it's just like, but it's the investment. I think it's that mindset shift, as it relates to the inner work that needs to be done. Like you can't always think the dollar, the money, the amount, but you are literally investing into yourself. Like this is going to be a
Yeah.
great return on your money, on your, finances, because you're investing into, those
Yeah.
seeds. That harvest is going to come, but you have to put, dollars towards what it's going to grow,
Yes.
I'm all for, I think that there's got to be that shift to, 'cause we're all human. We're all going to be like, what? How much? Like 3,000 for what? Like, what am I
Right.
but what are you getting? Like, it's your personal goal. So it's like you can't, 'cause you have some people, you tell some people, that's why you can't tell everybody what you're doing. You can tell someone, yeah, I paid $3,000 for, this particular thing. They're like, huh? Because they're not gonna understand. Like, you're not going where so I'm putting this money over here for a reason. You're putting your money into, I don't know, a large fry and a milkshake. Like,
Right, right.
you
And if that person's going to teach you how to get $3,000 a month back,
yes,
then hey, was that investment worth it? Absolutely.
exactly. So before we wrap up, I don't did you want to have any, or if you have any parting words to our listeners, encouragement? I always like to have our guests leave something that's on their heart, something they want to share to our listeners before we close out. I would love for you to do that.
Absolutely. I think that especially just in this time, things are really uncertain, or maybe the only thing that's certain is that things are going to keep getting hard, right? I just want to encourage the folks who are listening to be in community with each other, right? To be in community with other Black women. There is no better friend than a Black woman, right? There's no better cheerleader, supporter, and we give and give so much of ourselves. I want to encourage you to at least make that mutual, to take from some of those who are giving, right? To be with each other and to lift each other up, because we don't have to be in this alone. And yeah, I think my biggest thing is let's go through this together, because the more that you try to do alone, the more you try to put on your shoulders alone, the heavier it's going to feel. So let people share the load with you.
Mm. Wow, listen, so my takeaways from the episode today is definitely the community aspect. You don't have to do it alone, and being worthy.
Yes.
So I'm even going to change my language. I have to change my language. I've been saying know your worth, but the worthy piece, and knowing who you are. I might steal your crown, your princess crown. Like, I gotta.
Yes, ma'am. We all get our own. We could share it.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me on the episode today. Friends, all of her information, website links, where you can connect with her on social media is in the description. Be sure, especially if this is a season that you are in and you need to make some decisions, you need some help with imposter syndrome, or if you need to make that shift as a Black woman, connect with Miss Teen and get that mentor, get that coaching, because you are the most important thing that you can invest into. It's not the car, it's not the house, it's not anything that is tangible, because all that
Yeah.
stuff can always be bought. But invest in yourself for sure. So, friends, that was our time on the From Grief to Purpose podcast. And again, we are working on inner work for this month, and we definitely got some inner work done today, I believe. What do you think, Teen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This has just been a wonderful conversation. And I love that you are doing this series. So thank you for the work you're doing as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your light. I'm definitely borrowing it. I'm going to call you and email you. So, like,
Please do.
I'm about to blow you up, girl. So, don't, if I get on your nerves, just say, look, be on my nerves. It's like several emails today. Look. But I'm coming for that knowledge. I'm coming for it. All right, you guys, this was our episode today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all my followers. If you have not, click that subscribe button. Yeah, go ahead and subscribe to this community. We are here to grow together, heal together. All right, you guys, that's our time. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.